I stand here tonight and look back on what happened 40 years ago. I can only and truly say that this world has changed. It is a different America today than it was 40 years ago. Now, I didn't grow up in a very big city like him. I didn't grow up in a very big city like Akron, or Canton, or Cleveland, Columbus, or Cincinnati. I grew up on a farm in rural Alabama about 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. My parents were sharecroppers.
Mommy.
Back in 1944, when I was 4 years old, and I do remember when I was 4. How many of you remember when you were 4 years old? What happened to the rest of us? But in 1944, when I was 4 years old, my father had saved $300. And with the $300, he bought 110 acres of land. My family still owns that land today in rural Alabama. On this farm, we raise a lot of cotton and corn, peanuts, hogs, cows, and chickens. Now I know here at this great university, in this great city, in this great state, you're smart, you're wonderful. You send unbelievable people to Washington, but you don't know anything about raising chickens. Let me tell you what I had to do as a young boy growing up in rural Alabama during the 40s and the 50s. When the setting hen was set, I had to take the fresh eggs and mark them with a pencil, place them under the setting hen, and wait for 3 long weeks for the little chicks to hatch. Now some of you may be saying, now John Lewis, why do you mark those fresh eggs with a pencil before you place them under the setting hen? Well, from time to time, another hen would get on that same nest, and there would be some more eggs. You had to be able to tell the fresh eggs from the eggs that were already under the setting hen. Do you follow me? Well, if you don't follow me, it's okay. When these little chicks were hatched, I would fool these setting hens. I would cheat on these setting hens. I would take these little chicks and give them to another hen. I'll put them in a box with a lantern. Raise them on their own, get some more fresh eggs, mark them with a pencil, place them under their setting hen. I kept on cheating on this setting hen. And when I look back on it, it was not the right thing to do. It was not the moral thing to do. It was not the most democratic thing to do. It's not the most loving thing to do or the most non-violent thing to do. But I was never quite able to save $18.98 to order the most inexpensive incubator hatcher from the Susan Roebuck store. Now, some of you may be old enough to remember, we used to get the Susan Roebuck catalog.
Yeah.
Any of you old enough to remember?
Yeah.
That big book?
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy, thick. Some people call it a watering book. Some people call it a wish book. I wish I had this, I wish I had that. So I just kept on wishing. As a young child, I wanted to be a minister. I wanted to preach the gospel. So from time to time, to help my brothers and sisters and my first cousins, we would gather all of our chickens together in the chicken yard, like together here in this beautiful hall. My brothers and sisters, and first cousins, and the chickens would make up the congregation of the audience. I would start speaking or preaching, and I recall some of these chickens would bow their heads. Some of these chickens would shake their heads. They never quite said amen. But I'm convinced, Senator Brown, that some of these chickens that I preached to in the 40s and the 50s tended to listen to me much better than some of my colleagues listen to me today in the Congress. As a matter of fact, some of these chickens were just a little more productive. At least they produce eggs. That's enough of that story. As a young child growing up in rural Alabama, I tasted the bitter fruits of racism and I didn't like it. I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. On a Saturday afternoon with some of my brothers and sisters and first cousins, we would go downtown to the little town of Troy, to the theater. And all of us little black children had to go upstairs to the balcony. All of the little white children went downstairs to the first floor. I would come home and ask my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why segregation? Why racial discrimination? They would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in trouble. Don't get in the way. But one day in 1955, when I was 15 years old, in the 10th grade, I heard the voice of Martin Luther King Jr. on our radio. He was talking about the discipline and philosophy of nonviolence. He was talking about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. He was talking about the ability of a committed, determined people to make a difference in our society. But I heard his voice. I felt like he was talking directly to me. I knew then it was possible to strike a blow against legalized segregation and racial discrimination. I made a decision. I had an executive session with myself. I decided to get in trouble. I decided to get in the way, but it was good trouble. It was necessary trouble. Another generation of young people, another generation of students and teachers, another generation of men and women, black and white, had the courage, had the capacity, had the ability to get in the way. They put aside the comfort of their own lives and they got involved in the circumstances of others. Allison, William, Jeffrey, and Sandra. And 9 other students who were also wounded put aside the comfort of their own lives to get involved in the circumstances of others. They did not have friends or family in Cambodia. But they heard the call, they heard the voice, they heard the trumpet sound, and they responded. They heard the call of Martin Luther King Jr. and others who had spoken out against the war in Vietnam. They had seen the value of nonviolent, peaceful protests to bring change in America. So they decided to get in trouble. They decided to get in the way with good trouble, necessary trouble. But it was dangerous, very dangerous to speak truth to power in those days. These young people had heard about an incident that happened only 6 years before, the Freedom Summer of 1964. In 1964, it was almost impossible for people of color living in the South to register to vote. In a state like the state of Mississippi, it had a black voting age population of more than 450,000 and only about 16,000 blacks were registered to vote. A little town like Selma, Alabama, in 1964 and 1965, only 2.1% of blacks of voting age were registered to vote. One county in Alabama, Lowndes County, between Selma and Montgomery, the county was more than 80% African American. There was not a single registered African American voter in the county. You've had to pass a so-called literacy test. Interpretation section of the Constitution of the state of Alabama. On one occasion, a man was asked to count the number of bubbles in a bar of soap. Another occasion, a man was asked to count the number of jelly beans in a jar. People stood in unmovable lines. My old organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC, SNC, recruited more than 1,000 students, teachers, ministers, priests, rabbis, nuns, lawyers, and doctors to come to Mississippi. The summer night of June 21st, 1964, 3 young men that I knew, Andy Goodman, Mika Schreiner, and James Straney went out to investigate the burning of an African-American church being used for voter registration workshop. These three young men were stopped by the sheriff, arrested, taken to jail. Later that same night, they were taken from jail, turned over to the Klan, but they were beaten, shot, and killed. Like a 4 young student here. These young people didn't die in Cambodia. They didn't die in Vietnam. They didn't die in the Middle East or Eastern Europe. They didn't die in Africa or Central or South America. They died right here in our own country. And we must never, ever forget what happened here at Kent State, at Jackson State, or what happened to the three civil rights workers. Their lives must not be. Allison, Jeffrey, Sandra, and William. I knew they heard about the deaths of Shane, Goodman, and Schreiner. They also knew about what happened to Selma, Alabama, and what happened there just 1 year later. The story of Selma reminds me so much of what those 500 young people faced on May 4th, 1970, right here on this campus. In Selma. Because people have been denied the right to protest, the right to speak up, the right to speak out, to assemble, the right to register to vote.